Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be how I made this black and rust flying fox. I've made one like this before, but this is for a collection shop update. So if you want to know how I made him, then keep watching. Okay, so we're starting off with a resin cast of a head I sculpted from monster clay. Molded in silicone and then cast in resin, and what I'm doing is just painting everything first, and I usually prime my pieces before I paint it. That includes anything in polymer clay as well, and I use a canvas primer to prime all of my pieces just so the paint has something to stick to properly rather than just the surface of the resin or polymer clay. And then once it's dry, I can go ahead and paint the rest of the head. So for these ones, I originally sculpted them to be able to take glass eyes as well as painting them. So I'm painting these ones because they're quite dark, and I can achieve the same sort of effect when I'm using dark eyes by painting them. So I'm using some acrylic paint, just water-based acrylic paint to paint them, and I'm using the brand Chromacryl and also Derivian Matisse. And just going over the head to paint them black because the faux fur that I'm going to be using is black as well, so I don't want that white to show through. As for the feet, it's the same deal as the head, so it is a resin cast of something that I've sculpted, and I'm just going around and cleaning up all the little seam lines that you get when you cast things. And I'm just using a small blade. I should get myself a proper blade, but yeah, this one's been reduced to a little nub. But yeah, just cleaning up the seam lines, then also priming it with that same primer and painting it with the same paint as I'm doing the head. Moving on to the faux fur. So this flying fox is going to be black with a rust coloured neck. So what I'm doing is drawing out the rust coloured bits that I need on the neck first. And I've got this really nice faux fur that's perfect for this rust coloured neck, and I'm drawing out the patterns using a pattern that I've created myself, and this works for the hammerhead that I just made as well, which is perfect because it's a really simple pattern and it's only two sides. So but it does require a lot of hand sewing. So this is a little look at the rust colored faux fur that I'm going to be using for the neck. It's nice and thick, and it has like a subtle black tipped tip to it. So I'm using a small pair of sharp scissors just to cut these out, and you always want to make sure the fur direction is going in the right way. So in this case, you want the fur direction to go down the body. So just be aware when you're drawing your patterns out where the fur direction is going. As for the rest of the body, I'm using a black faux fur, and this is pretty much the same sort of structure and pile as that rust colored one, which is really good. If you're using a mixture of furs, I always try and get furs that are very similar to one another, so there's more of a streamlined transition between colors. So these faux furs are very, very similar, the same sort of pile length and the same thickness as well. And again, just drawing out those patterns on the back of the faux fur using that pattern that I made, minus the neck bit, because obviously we're going to be attaching that rust coloured faux fur. And again, just using a small pair of sharp scissors to cut out. I usually just cut out a rough bit of this first, and then I can sit down at my desk and cut out the rest of the fabric. And here we have a little look at what the black faux fur looks like. You can see it's quite shiny, and you can see it is quite thick as well. So it works really well with that rust colour. So this is what we have on the backing, and I've just used some chalk to mark it out like you saw before, but you can use like a grey lead or something. I'd caution on using texture because sometimes it can come through, especially if you have light coloured faux fur. So just going around and cutting the fabric out using those scissors and making sure anything that I'm attaching or sewing up needs to have a seam line or a seam allowance, and I usually do like 1/2 centimetre or so of seam allowance on each side, and that way when you sew the pieces together it's not taking away from what is going to be on the body. So once that's done, I can start pinning it together and then sewing it up on the sewing machine. So I use a sewing machine to sew some of my dolls, not all of them, but for these flying foxes, it has a lot of hand sewing just because of the nature of how I put the wings together. So if you're after a wing tutorial, I have one on my Patreon. It's the first wing tutorial. I have another one coming. I need to edit some things and make the video a little bit better. And then that will be available on my Patreon and also in my shop as well for these particular wings. And they can be used for dragon wings and anything as well. So that is also coming on my Patreon. So once I've inserted the structure of the armature, for this one I use a ball and socket armature, and it's the smallest ball and socket armature that I have. And then the wings are also from a wire armature. It's a combination of different sizes of wires. And so that makes it fully posable. So it's like a combination mix of ball and socket and wire armature for this doll. So once that's done, I can glue that neck to the head, and that acts as a nice solid base so I can start sewing everything together. So here's where the whole lot of hand sewing comes in. So you need to sew both sides of each side of the body. So on both sides of the wings, you need to sew up, and that way you can sort of integrate that faux fur in with the wings. So I use a ladder stitch to sew up all of my pieces, and the ladder stitch basically hides the seam in whatever you're sewing, but it just takes a long time to sew up these ones. And get yourself a good quality thread as well, because you need to pull these seams pretty tight, and you want something that is strong enough to be able to withstand the pressure and the tension. So once it's all sewn up, I can start putting everything together and closing everything up. So I'm just doing a little bit of work on the movable claw bit on the top of the wing. So it involves a lot of gluing and manipulating and just working in the fabric into the resin piece. But you'll learn more of that if you head over and check out their tutorial. So the little fiddly bits always take time, but it is definitely worth it because I think it brings the animal more to life and sort of, I guess, finishes things up a little bit better. So you can see how nicely that little nail at the top of the wing turned out. So once that's done and I'm happy with it, I can start filling in all the little details, including any lines or shading or markings that I'm going to be doing, and just going over the previous paintwork just to like a finishing touch on the paintwork. So just going in and filling back over on the nose and the ears and everything like that. And it really brings it to life when you add all these tiny little details at the end. So this guy is currently sold. I don't have any more black and rust flying foxes left, but I do have other colours available in my shop, as well as a hammerhead bat. So if you're interested in a flying fox, check out my shop. There's something for everyone basically, so all different types of colour schemes. I do have payment plans available, so just shoot me a message and we can work something out if that's what you want to do. But yeah, check it out, creaturesandnat.com. I have heaps of things up in there. If you want a little more as well, you can find more tutorials and printables and stuff over on my Patreon, which will also give you early access to any of my work that will become available. You can also check me out on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Creatures of Nat. And thanks for watching, thanks to my patrons, and I'll see you next time. Bye.